There hasn't been a more anticipated showdown between the United States and Canada since the War of 1812. Let's get to work.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That is Hunter Hodies, one of the co-hosts of Locked On Penguins. We want to thank everyone who's making Locked On NHL their first watch or listen of the day. Locked On NHL is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, very straightforward, folks. Each segment, we're going to talk Team Canada first, Team USA second segment, the final segment. Hunter and I will give you the keys to the game. We'll pick the game, give you reasons why. All right. Let's start with the Canadian question that's on everyone's mind. And I have a controversial take as far as the goaltending in Binnington. And I don't think we would be having this Binnington conversation if the Canada power play scored on one of their two opportunities in that game. You know, I think fundamentally, if Canada converts that first power play they get after the JT Miller instigator, I think we're having a very different hockey game where Canada gets out to the lead. And so much of what Team USA did to stifle Canada was based on the fact they were playing with a lead. You know, once they got it to 2-1 on the Gensel and the Dylan Larkin goals, USA was able to really kind of get control of the game, hone Canada, keep them to the outside. But as far as the Canadian perspective, I think the biggest thing for them tonight is their power play. It has been funky at points, and it's very simply just a case of too many cooks in the kitchen. All of these guys are great, and nobody wants to step on anyone's toes. So I really think that's of the utmost importance for Canada tonight.
I do think that's actually a good take. I don't think it's really that controversial. I mean, you saw the Canada power play really cook in that first game, Nick. Yeah. Like, it took not even 30 seconds for McKinnon, McDavid, and Crosby to do their thing. And it's like, well, that's a cheat code. You shouldn't take penalties against this unit, excuse me. But since then, it's been a work in progress. Like, that was great, but I think they're trying to make everything work a bit too quickly on that unit when you got to have more patience. Like, yes, these are all great players that you have on that top power play. You know, Crosby, one of the 5 greatest of all time. McDavid, he's already one of the best to ever do it. McKinnon, he's outstanding as well. But you still need to be a bit more patient, in my opinion. With the Binnington situation, I don't like the first goal that he gave up against Team USA in the last one. The game winner, I'll give him a little bit of grace. I think that's just a gorgeous shot from Dylan Larkin there, in my opinion. But has he been the main reason why Canada hasn't been, I guess, dominant at this? I'm not really too sure. I think Logan Thompson in a perfect world would be better. He's had the better numbers, but I don't think he's been flat out awful, Binnington, that is. Like, I think he's been able to make some timely saves when needed, but I still think he could be a bit better. Like, for example, that first Gensel goal, Nick, the one that tied it, he needs a save there. Like, I think you really need a save there. Outside of that, I felt like he played a really good game. Again, Larkin, that's just a really nice shot. But even after Team USA made it 2-1, he came up with a lot of really big, timely saves after that, especially also in the third period when Team USA was playing excellent lockdown defense. For Canada to win this game, they need to rely on their big dogs more. I like John Cooper. He's one of the best coaches in the league. But I feel like he relied too much on Hagel and Cirelli in the last game against Team USA. And I get it to a degree. Those are 2 of his guys for Tampa Bay. He's relied on them for a lot of clutch moments over the years. But in my opinion, Nick, I think you really need to trust your big dogs in this one. You've seen the type of player that Sidney Crosby is in big moments. You've seen the same thing from McKinnon. Connor McDavid, he might have his big moment tonight. Like, he's had big moments throughout his career, but he has a chance to really, I think, make a massive statement tonight for best on best. I think he needs to rely on those big 3, as well as some of the other big dogs if Canada wants to take this rematch.
That was something I was very curious to see, is how long it would take. And I do think this will be one of the keys that we'll hit on more in the third segment. But just how quick it takes to go basically to 3 lines in 2 pairs, because it happened really quick for Team USA on Saturday. You know, Adam Fox only ended up playing like 12, 13 minutes in that game. A lot of the bottom 6 guys ultimately didn't end up playing a ton in that game at large. And it's one of the real testaments to best on best hockey when it's working the way it's supposed to, is guys have to buy into their specialized roles. You know, Canada brought guys with very specific mindsets of what their roles on this team were going to be in terms of someone like a Colton Parayko, Travis Sanheim, Travis Konechny, Brandon Hagel, Sorelli, who you mentioned. All of those guys were brought for very specific, I would dare say, niche roles that you're not going to get as much ice time as you're used to, but I need full on commitment in that, 12, 13 minutes I'm going to get from you. Another thing I'm curious to see for Canada, I want to see if they keep going with the McDavid, McKinnon, Braden Point as the three centers to kind of work out around. Or I want to see, and I forget who brought it up on the Hockey PDOcast I was listening to on the way back from Florida, but they had mentioned, I want to say it was Thomas Drance who had said it took them a while to get Braden Point up with McDavid in the game on Saturday. I'll be curious to see if they go to that earlier in this game, because as much as we talk about McKinnon, McDavid, and Sid, Braden Point's one of the best playoff performers of the last 5-10 years. Both of their cup runs for Tampa Bay, he was over a point per game, something like 60 some odd points in 54 playoff games over 2 cup runs, consistently been in those big spots, lots of experience. And that's something that really skews heavily in Canada's favor. If you go player by player, they have significantly more big game experience when you go player by player, not just in terms of Olympics. I'm talking about just cup final appearances, conference final appearances. This is a group that has a lot of experience in these big games. You mentioned John Cooper. I know Mike Sullivan has plenty of big game experience as well, but these are guys who, when the chips are down, you're going to find yourself leaning in that direction.
Yeah, 100%. And I also am curious, if things, for example, go a bit south tonight, how long does it take for John Cooper to start loading up? You saw in that first matchup, Nick, I know you were on the show that day because you were in Florida going to watch the Daytona 500, but you saw them really load up Crosby and McDavid together at times. You saw them load up McKinnon and McDavid together. I mean, we all saw that crazy 3-on-3 to start the tournament when they were just loading up the big guns shift after shift after shift. And I think you could see the same thing at 5-on-5 here. I think John Cooper will take some of the lessons if Canada is down in this game against Team USA and apply it to this game and start loading up sooner, because I don't think he did that enough in the third period of the round robin game, Nick. Yeah. And I think that kind of came back to bite him. So I'm curious to see how that goes. I think you're going to see obviously a lot of speed in this one, a lot of skill. You're going to see that snarl. I don't think you're going to see 3 fights in the opening 9 seconds. Usually stuff like that doesn't do much for me anymore. I've said it on the show before. I used to love fighting a lot as a kid. I kind of grew out of it a little bit as I grew up, but I got to admit, that was freaking awesome in that round robin game. Those 3 fights in 9 seconds, that got me fired up. If that did not get you fired up, then I don't know what does, in my opinion. That was one of the 1 or 2% fights now that I was like, hell yeah, man. That took me straight back to my childhood. That was freaking awesome. But still, when it comes to the actual game, curious to see how he potentially loads up if Team Canada is down in this game, because we saw how great Team USA was at defending in that game against Canada. And that's a Mike Sullivan coach game to a T. I have seen that so many times from Mike Sullivan as the head coach of the Penguins, especially in 2016 and 2017, Nick. The way they defended in that game, that is how the Penguins defended when they had the right personnel. And I think you'll see something similarly tonight if they're up.
One last thing on Canada before we move on, take a break, talk about the U.S. Canada's got to play their game as much, and we'll talk about the forechecking, the hitting, the fighting from the American perspective in our next segment. But that's not what Canada's here to do. No. They don't have a Tkachuk brother. They don't have a JT Miller. Sure, they got some guys who aren't afraid to hit. They got some guys who aren't afraid to fight, but play your game. I hate to spend time talking about the Patriots here, but the whole do your job thing works because you do your job. Don't do someone else's job. Don't try and do someone else's job. Don't try and play the other team's game. Get to your game. Live in transition, force the American defenders to make plays in space. You're going to have no McAvoy. You're going to have Sanderson in for him. We're going to talk about that in a second. And we'll talk about how the Americans are going to try and defend that Canadian rush offense coming up next. So be sure to stick around. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shell variety. They're the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Hunter mentioned it. I was on the road, had quite a few packs of these in my bag for the car, or when I'm trying to squeeze in some protein, they are a go-to. Or if you're old school and you like cracking open the shell, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Hunter and I on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. And we'll see as far as lineup decisions for the United States. Brady Tkachuk was at morning skate, so the assumption is he's going to play. The assumption is Jake Sanderson is going to draw in for Charlie McAvoy, who is out for the remainder of this tournament and is probably going to be out for a while for the Bruins. I know that there's been a flu going around since the tournament relocated to Boston that's knocked quite a few guys on all 4 teams out of games. So we'll see what shape guys are in. If either of the alternates, I believe Tace Thompson and Brett Pesce were brought to Boston as alternates if people couldn't go. But you're going to assume Austin Matthews, who sat out on Monday, is going to play tonight. Brady Tkachuk, we mentioned. Matthew Tkachuk's already said he's playing. But I'll be curious to see the lineup stuff as far as who plays with who. The big thing for me, if I'm trying to win this game as the States, I said it from the Canadian perspective of try and make these guys defend one-on-one, make them defend in space, because you put Brock Faber, Adam Fox, Jake Sanderson, you put those guys on an island and you make them play physically and you try and force them to use their body to take away space, you're going to have a reasonable chance of success. All of those guys are positioning and IQ and skating based of, I'm going to cut down the angle. I'm going to prevent you from getting there, but I'm not going to knock you off the puck. I'm not going to be able to prevent you from getting around me. If you do, you go back and watch the McDavid goal from Saturday. McAvoy's not even in a terrible position. It's just McDavid's that good. And yes, you get him in space, you get McKinnon in space, Braden Point in space. You attack with speed and you force these guys to make plays. Even McAvoy, who's probably their second best defensive defenseman after Slavin, you make him in space one-on-one against a great player, you're going to have a chance. And for Canada, that's going to be the key for them. For the States, that means you got to do what you did well on Saturday, but probably even better as far as cutting off angles, forcing perimeter shots, and really trying to keep things to the outside.
Right. Mike Sullivan likes to employ what I call as a 1-2-2 neutral zone trap. He did that a lot with the Penguins in 2016 and 2017. It worked like a charm. You saw that on display in the first round robin game where Canada really had no space, especially in the third period. Team USA did such a great job of cutting off angles, limiting the shots to, 30 to 35 feet out, not really letting Canada get to any of the high danger areas right around the net. Like, they did such a great job defending away from the puck. And when they did have the puck, they were getting a little bit of offensive zone time, but they were still, again, getting easy clears, forcing Canada to regroup. And as we mentioned, John Cooper, it took him a while to start loading up his lines, but by then it was kind of too little too late. And then you saw Team USA really defend great in that final minute. Jake Gensel gets the empty net goal to make it 3-1. Just a quick lineup note, Nick. Mike Sullivan did say game time decision for his lineup. Everyone, though, is available outside of Charlie McAvoy, so Brady Tkachuk is available tonight. But you know who I'm really looking for a potential big game performance? I want to see it from Austin Matthews. I'm channeling my inner Michael Irvin. What are you prepared to do about it? Literally, I need to see Austin Matthews play one of the games of his life tonight. Like, I think he's been a little bit quiet to start this tournament. I think you could see him have a potential big game tonight for the States. Jack Eichel has been phenomenal.
Eichel's been their best forward. Eichel's been their best forward.
I think so too. He's been phenomenal in all of these games. His play away from the puck, Nick, is especially outstanding. I think not enough people give him the love that he deserves for being one of the best two-way forwards in the league. The way that he's been able to shut down opposing top lines has been awesome. The Tkachuk brothers, you know what you're going to get from them in this game. You saw it on display in the round robin game. But again, man, I'm really looking at Austin Matthews. I think this could be a game where he has a big performance for Team USA. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the way Mike Sullivan employs his 1-2-2 trap. And again, Pinching has been a problem with the Penguins these last couple of years. I think in this one, you have to be especially diligent with how you time your pinches. You can't do these 25, 75 pinches, 30, 70 pinches. No, you got to do, 55, 45 at least, 60, 40, obviously 70, 30. But you need to make sure when you're going for a pinch, it's the right move, because if you screw up, they're going 2-on-1, 3-on-2 the other way. Canada will make you pay almost every time.
And that's the thing. Canada wants to live in transition. They have an edge in terms of foot speed, where if you line these guys up and consistently have those rush chances where you're pinching and you're trading back and forth, Canada's going to have a better chance in that type of environment. Part of what made the States game so effective in the round robin stage was just getting the puck in deep, forcing Canada's best guys to play defense. And I don't know if you know this, Hunter, but if Connor McDavid's playing defense, he can't score. Same thing with McKinnon, same thing with Sid. You force those guys to play defense, and it's not like they're bad at defense. It's just the more you put guys in disadvantageous positions, the better you're going to do. I think the big thing I'm curious to see, you mentioned it from the Canadian perspective of how quick they'll be to load up. I think the States are in a position where they've really liked some of the pairings they've found. They really liked putting Austin Matthews with with Jack Hughes. And I think the two of them together present a unique blend of dynamic ability where they're both really strong skaters. I think Jack Hughes is getting a little bit too much flack for not putting up counting stats, in spite of the fact that he's been playing good defense, which isn't something you would typically associate with what
they got to get him cooking, though, offensively. I think he's been a bit slower than I'd like. He's got to get cooking tonight. I like the fit on the line with Matthews, but I think I need to see more on the offensive zone.
The first game they played against Finland, the two of them were really good together in terms of using the space, creating space with their foot speed. They were on the ice for one of the Gensel goals in the game. I'm curious to see that. I'm a smidge weary of keeping the Tkachuk brothers with Jack Eichel just in terms of foot speed, because the three of them together are not as fast as a McKinnon or a McDavid. And look, obviously we're talking about specific specialization, heavy matchups, and it's not going to take long for the benches to get short. I imagine this is going to be a very tight and a very, very, very close game. I do not expect a lot of separation. In fact, I expect there to be trepidation, in all honesty. I don't expect the game to start with as much fanfare and dramatics. I think if you're the States, I think you don't want to fall into the trap of feeling like you need to do that. And you had mentioned it before in the last segment, as far as the fights and what they're good. Look, if the Tkachuk brothers, JT Miller, if it fires them up, that's great. That you need that sometimes for a moment like this. You don't want to have to fall into the trap of feeling like you're relying on that type of thing. Same thing with the big hits on the forecheck. I think it was Brady who threw the big hit on Drew Doughty deep in the offensive zone behind the net. The hit McAvoy threw on McDavid. All that stuff is great, but don't go chasing it. Don't go and try and win the game with one big hit, with one big play. This is a playoff environment. We are used to a playoff game starting relatively slow, where both teams will dump it in a few times, just get their feet under them, get their legs going, and then the game starts to take shape. And then both teams can start to take prolonged attacks to try and feel each other out. That's kind of what I expect tonight. I expect a bit of a slow start and both teams to kind of have a tinge of, I would say, nervous excitement to it. Not nervousness, but nervous excitement. No one wants to make a mistake in this situation.
100%. I think you're looking at a 3-2 type of game here, maybe even 4-3. I don't think you're going to see a really low-scoring game here, Nick, but I also don't think you're going to see a 6-5, 7-6 game. I think you're going to see a really tight checking game that comes down, again, really to the final minute, kind of like how the last game went. Obviously, I know Jake Gensel got the empty netter to make it 3-1, but that was still a really tight game throughout, where the U.S. outplayed Canada, I felt, for the majority of those 60 minutes. I don't think you're going to see fights to start this game. And honestly, after how fun that was in the last one, this might be a hot take to some people. I don't need to see that again to start this game. I just want to get straight to the hockey. Again, I know that might be a hot take to some people, but that's how I feel about it. But I think those first 5 minutes will be an early tell. That's always the barometer I use when, I watch a lot of Penguins games and such. How do you fare in the first 5 minutes? Do you pass the vibe check for the game? That's what I'm going to be keeping my eye on for this one. And I can't wait. I have my prediction. Nick has his, and we're going to dive into that to end the show here because I haven't been this amped up for a game in a long time. Like, this is best on best. This is the last big appetizer before the Olympics next year. And Team USA has a chance to send a message to the rest of the hockey world saying like, hey, we're the best team in the world, and we should be the favorite heading into the Olympics next year.
Hunter queued it up beautifully. We'll be right back. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Hunter and I on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. And for our final segment, we'll talk keys to the game. We'll pick the game. So I want to start number one. This game, more likely than not, gets defined by who wins the neutral zone as far as transition. You've been alluding to the way the Penguins like to clamp down the neutral zone, slow down the game, force you to kind of dump and chase and really work for your offense. And that was really the key for the States winning last Saturday was, yeah, Canada had the zone time. They had the puck a lot, but when you have to string together 4, 5, 6, 7 passes in the offensive zone to get one decent look, it's hard to do that for an entire period and most of the game, frankly, once the States got out to the lead. So it's a really delicate balance there where if you get that lead, how do you respond in terms of protecting it? And then number two, can you get that extra goal to give yourself a little more room? Because these teams play a little bit different as far as their preferred what they want to do. You know, the States with the Tkachuk brothers and Eichel, they're perfectly fine turning this into a slog. They're good below the goal line, along the boards. They're going to win a lot of 50-50 pucks and just wear you down over the course of the game. You know, Austin Matthews isn't known for that, but Austin Matthews can do that. He's an imposing big frame body. You get into that bottom six where you have guys like JT Miller and Vincent Trocheck who can bring that element to the game as well, where they're perfectly comfortable in that type of rock fight. And I think, frankly, that's one of the things I really enjoy about this type of tournament where it's best on best is you have guys like JT Miller and Dylan Larkin who are first or second line players on their teams back in the NHL. And here they're playing 12, 13 minutes a night, killing penalties, and they get to play with a little bit more abandon because they're not playing 21, 22 minutes a night like they do in the NHL. So being that they're playing 6, 7 fewer minutes a night, they can go a little bit harder in the minutes they do get. And you notice it, you know, Dylan Larkin, he looked the part, and that's not a player I would say I consider in that elite tier with the upper echelon of the league, but he looked every bit as comfortable as the players around him on that ice. And, you know, that's always one of the real tells when you're watching good hockey is that everyone looks like they belong. And last Saturday, there wasn't a guy out there on either team who looked out of place.
100%. And to your point about Dylan Larkin, I mean, no disrespect to Red Wings fans. This is probably the biggest game he has played in throughout his career.
He's never been in a playoff game.
No, I know. I didn't want to disrespect Red Wings fans.
At least I don't think so. I'm fact checking that. He might have played. They might have made the playoffs once in like 2016. But continue.
But I really do feel like heading into this game, this is going to be the biggest game.
Yes, he's made the playoffs once. But continue.
Yeah, once. Yeah. So even with that, I still think this is the biggest game he will have played in.
All of these guys are saying that. Brady Tkachuk said it. Adam Fox, who's been to 2 conference finals, said it. You know, this is...
And if Matthew Tkachuk is saying it, he just won the Stanley Cup last year. Like, he played a Game 7 in a Stanley Cup final. The fact that he's saying that should really tell you all you need to know. But for me, yeah, I mean, if the U.S. can, again, do what they did with the way they played in transition, the way they were able to limit Canada to the outside, they will have a really good shot of winning this game. Obviously, Connor Hellebuck, he has to keep being Connor Hellebuck. I think he has been fantastic during this tournament. Got a little bit scary to the start in the opening game against Finland, but ever since that first goal that he allowed, Nick, he's been elite. Like the player we saw during the regular season, I need to keep seeing it tonight against Canada. The U.S. has the goaltending edge in this tournament. It needs to be that again in this game. That's also going to be something I'm looking for. And again, man, I mentioned it in the second segment. I got to see it from Austin Matthews. I think this has the potential to be a big, big game from him. And I'm really fascinated to see how this goes. I know who you're picking. I'm taking Team USA. I said it before the tournament. I'm going to pick them. I think they are
they're the better team. I undoubtedly think they are the better team.
Like, I'll say that. They're not the underdogs anymore. This isn't like 2014 where, remember when the U.S. played Canada in that big game and it felt like those two teams could play 5 more times and the U.S. was never going to score. That's how different the talent disparity was, at least for that, in my opinion. Like, in that U.S. team, it was decent, but that Canada team was just so freaking stacked, and they had Carey Price in net. This team, though, they have the goalie, they have the forwards, they have the defensemen mostly. I know Charlie McAvoy is not playing. There was all these rumors about Quinn Hughes and whether he was going to be joining the team. And man, it would be fun if he was going to be playing, but he's not fully healthy yet. But I think the U.S. is finally just about caught up to Canada now in terms of talent. And I am going to take the better goalie. And I will take, when it's all said and done, one of the best head coaches in the league to win this game. And Mike Sullivan, with the way that he can employ his system with this team, I'm going to take Team USA to win this.
Okay, so I'm going to give you cliches, and I typically don't do that when we're doing analysis, but we're picking one game in a made-up tournament, and it's real simple. Number one, it's really hard to beat the same team twice in a week. These teams played less than a week ago. Canada will have Cale Makar this time, which they didn't the first time these two teams played. Yep. I think Thomas Harley deserves to stay in this lineup. I think he's done a really nice job as far as transition and breaking out. I think he's undoubtedly someone who should be in consideration for Canada next year when the Olympics roll around. Number two, I think Team USA is playing with fate a little bit too much as far as making overtures to certain political figures and trying to make this game a little bit more than it is. I think anytime you're poking the bear and trying to even passively antagonize the other team, you never want to give a team more material to get riled up or excited for a game. And I think when you've got like the genuine psychopaths in the Canadian locker room, like Sid, like Crosby, like McKinnon and McDavid, you know, these are guys who have been waiting their entire lives for moments like this. You know, Connor and McKinnon have been waiting 10 years for this chance to be in a best on best with the leaf on their sweater. I think everything in my being as a sports fan who has a long and tortured history of being excited for moments like this only to watch their team let them down, I will be hoping the United States wins tonight, but all of the environmental and the vibes factors lead me to believe Canada wins this in about as soul crushing as humanly possible. You know, nothing can probably ever top the 2010 golden goal on Canadian soil in the Olympics, but I am expecting a Terminator-esque performance from Crosby tonight, just because this might be it as far as big game environments. You know, they'll go to the Olympics next year. We'll see how Canada fares. We very well might get this rematch in the gold medal game next year. It could be earlier than that, but you only get so many chances at moments like this. And if you want a rationale for picking the United States, every guy on that team is in the age cohort, except for Connor Hellebuck, Chris Kreider, Vincent Trocheck, and Brock Nelson. Every other guy on that team is in the age cohort where they were in middle school or high school and watched the movie Miracle more than once. And that became an indelible part of their personality, where if you dropped a line from that movie in front of them, absolutely they're going to finish the line. You hear them on the team talk about that these guys grew up with that movie, that it's an important part of their hockey identity. And I very much think the United States is a more talented team. I think the goaltending advantage and the defensive, even without McAvoy, I think Jake Sanderson is ready for this type of situation. I think the States have a better lineup. I think everything intangible as far as vibes, I have to take Canada. There's too much sports fan in me that has been too excited for moments like this and just had my heart ripped out. I think Canada wins on vibes.
I don't need Sid to do this again to me, man. I've rooted against him in multiple Olympics. He's torn my heart out numerous times. I know 2010 especially he did. I don't need to see this happen again, especially at the end of his career. I know he's a cyborg in these type of games. He's 27-1 in his last 28 games with Team Canada.
And he's doing this not healthy either.
Like, I know. You literally, it looks like he's playing with only one arm. Like, that's what it looks like. And he still has 5 points in 3 games, Nick. Like, that's the type of player that he is. He didn't want to miss this tournament for the world. I can easily see a lot of different ways Canada wins this, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just being biased, but I'm going to take Team USA to win this. a little bit off vibes, a little bit off Connor Hellebuck, a little bit under Mike Sullivan's system, and maybe a little bit under a notion that, hey, of hope that, hey, the big guns show up tonight and outduel Canada's big guns. But hey, that's what we're here for. I'm excited to watch this game. That's why I'm taking Team USA, though.
Let me give you a hot take before we get out of here. Mitch Marner, big game tonight.
Hey, he did well in the first game against Team Sweden. I can see it. But I need Austin Matthews to answer the call here, man.
Some Leaf is winning a big game tonight. One of Mitch Marner or Austin Matthews is winning a big game tonight. So we can dispel some narrative after tonight. But that'll do it for today's show. Before we get out of here, if you could be so kind, please go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where we are bringing the daily league-wide stories that matter within local coverage from all of your favorite Locked On hosts. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Hit the subscribe button if you're watching over on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, drop the show a 5-star review. We will talk to you guys next Thursday. Until then, enjoy the game tonight. I will be rooting for the United States. I don't feel good about it, though. We'll see you guys.